Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with Extra History. Today we got Ramesses the Great, Reign of the God King. So, last time we were here, we saw him, gain his, throne and take on the Hittites. Hittites, we'll go with that. Hard to say sometimes, but anyway. Now for his home rule in Egypt. And I guess time for the architecture to come up. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's check it out.
Abu Simbel Temple Complex, 1255 BCE. The men and women of Nubia gather to see the man who claims to be their ruler by right of conquest. But they see more than a king. Ramesses the Great has come to inaugurate the enormous temple he has built, one that he commissioned to overawe and Egyptianize the Nubians. Its official name, the Temple of Ramses, beloved of Amun, and it's a temple to himself. The entrance is flanked with statues of Ramses, 66 feet high, and inside he's enthroned as a god within the divine pantheon. The walls tell of his great deeds at the Battle of Kadesh, his victories over the Shurdan and the Nubians, and his treaty with the Hittites. Alongside him in the inaugural ritual is his great wife, Nefertari. Her own temple is within sight, but she's breathing hard under the desert sun, for she is dying. And soon, her husband, the God King, will face the rest of his long reign alone.
Poor Nefertari.
This episode was made possible by the fine folks over at Total War Pharaoh, a phenomenal new entry into the Total War franchise I am super pumped about that also ties into today's historical tale. And it's available to snag right the heck now at the link below. Go
get it!
Last episode, we talked about the Battle of Kadesh and how Ramses used it as propaganda for the rest of his reign, despite the fact he essentially lost. Or did he? Because Ramses...
Honestly, from what I think they described it last episode, it was more of a draw. Like, both sides couldn't really continue fighting. In a way, the battle was kind of a win, but was unable to move on, so they were kind of stalled out. Is that really a loss? I don't know. I mean, they won a major battle, so I guess? I don't know, nuances of war. What are you gonna do? Anyway.
Ramses had a workaround for that. You see, when he got back to Egypt, he simply declared the battle an overwhelming victory, and he carved this achievement into the walls of temples across Egypt. In Egyptian religion, temple walls were sacred spaces, considered the actual words of the gods. So by carving his victory into temples, he essentially made that victory true. Which is kind of ironic in a way,
rewriting
since most
history.
people don't remember Ramses for the Battle of Kadesh at all, but rather as Egypt's greatest builder. See, when he came to power, he didn't realize that he'd have such a long reign. In fact, his father had died early, so in a panic, Ramses entered a fever of building projects. First, he hit the low-hanging fruit, completing temples his father had nearly finished, and, chiseling his own cartouche onto them. Next, he put his stamp on some things that he hadn't strictly, built. Noticing that the shallow wall carvings of previous dynasties were easily obliterated, he ordered his name and scenes carved so deep so they couldn't be altered, and so the deep shadow made them more dramatic. Next, he launched perhaps his greatest project, moving the capital from Thebes to a new city in the east, built using one of his father's summer palaces as a starting point. This new city, named Ramses, or Domain of Ramses Great in Victory, what else, was more of a military base than a cultural center, however. For Ramses knew that much of his early reign would be about securing and patrolling Canaan and Nubia, and it would serve as a launching point for those expeditions. When the army marched to Kadesh, it did so from Ramses. Then came a massive mortuary temple complex, the Ramesseum, where he could be worshipped after death. At the same period came Abu Simbel, and enormous statues across his territories, all of whom proclaimed his great victory at Kadesh. Unusually, though, these did not merely depict Ramses as a king, favored by the gods, who would one day join them. No, they showed him as already deified. Not only that, Ramses would make sacrifices to himself, or rather the god he would be. So stay with me for a moment. Ramses would go to the Ramesseum and pass giant statues of Ramses and carvings of Ramses sacrificing to Ramses before he, you guessed it, sacrificed to Ramses. And if you think that's bananas, there's also some evidence he would sometimes stand on the lap of his giant statues and throw gifts into the crowd below. Now, this is possibly not just due to arrogance. Coming from a new dynasty with a less than stellar bloodline, Ramses likely thought these displays were necessary to justify his hold on power. But let's not
I'll
absolve
lead
him
by
totally
example,
of
I
ego
guess.
either. His diplomatic letters to his enemies turned friends, the Hittites, betrayed a certain prickly, quarrelsome nature and a tendency to lash out if he felt disrespected. His correspondence
sounds
is
about
full
right.
of complaints about the quality of diplomatic gifts. And once, when a Hittite king asked that Ramses send Egyptian doctors and medicines, the best in the ancient world, mind you, to help his sister conceive a child, the pharaoh kinda snapped. She is 50 or 60. No man can prepare medicine to help her.
Ouch.
Yeah, it wasn't surprising that Nefertari handled a significant amount of the diplomatic letter writing. Her course.
Well, to be fair, Ramses sees himself as a god, not a man going to be a god. So he's got a high ego. Yeesh. Which, honestly, goddamn, no wonder he's short-tempered. That and the whole, quick, blow to samples. Well, there is a reason for that. If you guys remember the Hatshepsut Soot episode of Puppet History, the Egyptian belief in the afterlife was basically the more that people remember you, the longer you're going to be able to spend time in their version of the afterlife. I think, I don't remember what it was called. So yeah, basically, as long as people remember you, you're good to go. If not, well, poof, gone. No soul, nothing. And honestly, Hatshepsut nearly fell that rain until the archaeologists found her tomb. Not sure how they found her name of Hatshepsut. You never know, but So, yeah, like I said, it's all about that prestige, baby, and glory. Which, you can see how far it can go, considering what's going on, what the Romans did during the First Punic Wars. Sorry. Man, I'm referencing other videos, aren't I? But then again, related, why not? Moving along.
Correspondence being far more, well, diplomatic. At least
Thanks,
it was
Nefertari.
for the first 25 years of his reign. Because by year 24, Nefertari started to weaken. Temple reliefs at Abu Simbel show their eldest daughter conducting some inaugural rituals, suggesting that Nefertari, who was herself a major feature of the temple, probably had to bow out. When she died, he interred her in a massive and opulent tomb, the largest in the Valley of the Queens. And while he took another chief wife who he favored, it's clear that Nefertari was his greatest love. Now, the irony of Ramses' reign, however, is that all of this constant effort to secure a legacy worked a little too well. First of all, his building projects set a standard that none of his successors could live up to, especially if they believed the propaganda on his temple walls. 9 other pharaohs would choose the name Ramses, but with none of them ever truly recapturing his glory. And speaking of those who came after him, that itself became a bit of an issue. See, Ramses is recorded as having 200 wives, including 2 daughters of Hittite kings, and from those wives, he had around 100 legitimate children. So many that he actually, symbolically, married several daughters in order to keep their status high. We think around 50 of these children were boys, with a line of succession that was heavily complicated by being born to multiple wives of varying rank. Now, we've talked a lot on this show about the problem of rulers not being able to produce a male heir, right? Well, here's the rare instance
Yeah,
of a
he
ruler
pretty much
with
had too many
male
heirs.
This alone might not have been a big deal, though. After all, Ramses not only promoted and favored his sons to an unusual extent. The first 8 were featured in order on several monuments. He actively raised their profiles. No, the problem was that he just lived so darn long. His first son with Nefertari, a hardy man who served as an army commander, died a year after his mother. His second son was crown prince for 25 years, until the 50th year of his father's reign, when he too died. Ramses' third son had already passed away at that point, so now his fourth son had become heir. That son, Khammuraset, has been called the first Egyptologist. A high priest, he made it his life's mission to uncover and restore artifacts and tombs that were ancient even in the time of Ramses, with some burials stretching back 1,000 years. However, he'd also occasionally stamp his father's name on artifacts to symbolically claim them, even while restoring them. In his role as priest, he also helped his father celebrate the Sed Festival, a celebration that was conducted for the first time in the 30th year of a pharaoh's reign, then every 3 years after that. Ramses celebrated 12. He ruled for 66 years, well into his 90s, and each year he sent more and more of his beloved sons to the massive tomb he dug out in the Valley of the Kings.
Youch.
By the time Kayamwasit died, so many of his brothers had already gone to the tomb that it was actually Ramses' 13th son, Merneptah, who took over as crown prince. And it was he who, when his father finally died, oversaw the funeral rites and burial. Yet Merneptah was already 70 and would only rule for a decade. His sons and grandsons, their power increased by Ramses having named so many children to high positions, would then squabble for the throne, ensuring that the 19th dynasty survived only 24 years after Ramses' death.
Whoops.
This period of infighting weakened Egypt ahead of the Bronze Age collapse, which sent the whole region into a decline. Were it not for a strong pharaoh of the 20th dynasty, Ramses III, borrowing his distant ancestor's great name, Egypt might have collapsed entirely. But even so, Ramses' legacy was secure. Having shaped Egypt so thoroughly, it was inevitable that later generations would know him as a great ruler. A huge bust of his head remains a central attraction at the British Museum. Abu Simbel is one of Egypt's most famous sites, and his monuments inspired Shelley's famous poem, Ozymandias, reflecting on the passing nature of power.
Damn.
It's no wonder that in 2021, when the Egyptian government moved 22 pharaohs from the Egyptian Museum to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization,
Yes, Ramses
in
was one of
capsules
them.
decorated like traditional funeral boats, the mummy of Ramses the Great attracted extra attention from the press and onlookers, and preceded by actual chariots. The victor of Kadesh, the great builder of Egypt, once again made a procession to his honored resting place. Now that is a lasting legacy. But, you know, maybe you think you could do better, right?
And there's Total War sponsor. Oh, they managed. And I gotta say, Ramses really went overboard. And you really see the downside of a harem. Which, again, considering 200 wives, goddamn. Or was it children? I don't remember. Jesus. But still, that many sons, and you outlived 13 of them, and a lot more. I mean, remember, the 13th son got to be the king for a decade, but you get the idea, right? Just, they were gone. Well, the rest of the sons were, ouch. Actually, how many sons did he outlive? Like, remember, he buried so many of them. Whew. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that one. Let me know what you guys think of Ramses the Great. What do you think of his rule? Well, anyway, until next time, guys, see ya.